Hello and welcome back for another Giant Slayer TFT Top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown to the top champions for ranked play in patch 11.10. We'll be looking at the top carries, frontliners, and utility champions in the current meta. Given the meta isn't all that diverse, expect to see quite a few Skirmishers and Dragonslayers in our top 10. With that said, let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Starting off our top 10, we have Garen coming in as the number 10 champion. It feels a bit odd to have a 5-cost champion in the 10th slot on our list, but to be fair, 5 costs in the current meta are struggling. The only other consistently used 5 cost that actually does something useful is Viego. Kindred is also quite good, but doesn't always fit onto a player's board for various reasons. Garen deserves a spot in the top 10 because of how much he enables magic damage comps. We're in a meta that heavily favors physical damage, so anything that can boost the consistency of magic damage compositions helps a lot. And Garen does quite well thanks to his ability providing an AoE magic resistant shred. Plus he's relatively difficult to kill between the shield he gains and having the Dawnbringer trait, which heals him a decent amount. The downside for Garen, and this is true of a lot of frontliners, is Trundle. Trundle will eat Garen's stats away, leaving him as bait for the rest of whatever build the enemy player is running. Because of that, Garen isn't all that reliable when it comes to frontlining. It takes quite a bit of luck to hit Garen 2 and multiple other frontline champions to help with the Trundle issue. But on the plus side, when all the frontline ducks are in a row, AP builds can truly shine. Unfortunately, God King is still a joke of a synergy, so it won't really be doing all that much for him. It's really just his innate ability that keeps Garen relevant, though Knight is useful for Kayle stall boards, and Dawnbringer can help keep him alive slightly longer. All in all, he's a must-have for AP builds, and only somewhat playable in other comps. Moving along, we have Jax coming in at number 9. Wait a second, Jax is only 9th place? But aren't we in a skirmisher-dominated meta? Yes, we are, but Jax, while important, is not really what makes skirmishers pop off. He's the main carry mid to late game, and you will need him, so he's important, but skirmishers are doing well for a lot of other reasons. One is how early you can get 6 skirmishers up and running, which doesn't require a Jax. Both Adir and Nidalee can carry just fine through stage 3 and most of stage 4, it's only after that point that you'll need Jax. Pantheon is a super good tank, Kennen provides utility, and of course Trundle is ridiculous. Put all these factors together and you've got a trait with solid champions. But as we said, you will need Jax if you're planning to run a skirmisher comp. To do so, you will need to focus on items, which usually best in slot for him is Bloodthirster, Quicksilver, and Runins, though there are other items that you can use for him. There is a major downside to Jax, and that's how contested he can be since multiple players are often contesting skirmishers. Not only skirmishers, but Ironclad is quite popular now in the meta since we're in a meta with a lot of physical damage. This means a lot of lobbies have half or more of the players vying to find a 2-star Jax, which can hurt the scaling of skirmishers a lot once the late game hits stage 5 and 6. Still, the fact that he is contested does point to him being valuable. Our argument here is that while he's important in the meta, he's not the most important champion for either skirmishers or Ironclad. Up next, we have Viego coming in at number 8. Viego is a frustrating champion to play against, and sometimes he's frustrating to use when he chooses the wrong enemy unit to target with his ability. While he's not quite up there in terms of frustration as Urgot was, he's around the same level as Lee Sin. There is counterplay and he won't always pop off, but when he does, it's definitely a game changer. And this is entirely because of his ability that basically CC locks a unit for 5 seconds. 5 seconds of not only being stunned, but taking damage, which increases the longer that they're held by Viego. Once killed, they're resurrected and fight for the other team. This leads to moments where Viego, being an assassin, gets to the enemy backline, snipes the carry, and the fight is just over. Which is ridiculous, but Viego at least can be interrupted, so there is a bit of counterplay. But his crowd control plus stealing the unit is what makes him so useful, especially in the current meta, where he's also a skirmisher. It's odd that he has the skirmisher tag considering he rarely ever auto-attacks, but nonetheless, he is one. Because of that trait, he's insanely popular in the current meta and often decides endgame fights with his ability. All in all, Viego is a frustrating champion to play against, made even more frustrating by how prevalent he is in the meta thanks to skirmishers. Hopefully we'll see him toned down and other 5 costs brought up in future patches. Next up, we have another assassin, Diana, who comes in as the number 7 champion. While Diana has fallen down in our list, she's still one of the most played champions in the current meta. This is for a few reasons. One, she's a Dragonslayer, meaning she fits well in all the compositions running either Trundle or Mordekaiser. 2, her ability helps a lot against the players trying to run ranged carries, especially Velkoz players. And 3, she's still the best Frozen Heart holder in the game. Frozen Heart was nerfed, so it's not quite as popular of an item to run, but on Diana, it still provides a lot of utility. But the main reason to use Diana is for her ability, which disrupts the backline and can do quite well into melee champions, since it will hit a lot of them. Unfortunately, Quicksilver is being used a lot, so Diana won't always have a lot of value depending on the lobby. But at the end of the day, she's heavily contested for her traits and utility, making her a staple in the current meta. Moving along, we've got the number 6 champion up next, Ryze. If you're worried about playing against assassins, Ryze is the key to success against them. This is due to his ability, which stuns whoever he targets, with the second stun spreading to nearby enemy champions. This is really effective against clumped up boards like melee-heavy skirmishers, as well as any assassins jumping into the backline. It may be difficult to always find room for Ryze in your composition, but doing so is almost always worth it for his utility. Slap a dark blue buff on him or just a Shojin, and he'll start spam stunning the enemy team. And he's a Mystic, meaning you'll get value by splashing him in with a secondary Mystic, which often provides even more utility. Lastly, he does provide Forgotten in Draven compositions, as those boards are usually running either Forgotten with Thresh or Viego. While 3 Forgotten isn't all that special, it's just another bonus to running Ryze. We've reached the middle of the pack with Velkoz coming in at number 5. We're currently in a meta that favors auto-attacking champions like Jax and Draven. Even Mordekaiser, who does mostly magic damage, is reliant on auto-attacking to do his damage. Velkoz provides an alternate way to play in the current meta and is by far the best range caster. Karma can do well, but requires specific items, Invoker, and Garen with a solid frontline. Heimerdinger got nerfed into the ground and is barely playable once every 20 games. Teemo costs too much health. Brand is alright, but even in brand compositions, you still use Velkoz. So there's barely any other options in the current meta if you want to play AP. Luckily, Velkoz is strong enough to carry that burden, but he's not perfect due to his targeting at times being not so great. And he struggles against champions like Diana and Viego. But if you're diligent about scouting and positioning, you'll get a lot out of Velkoz, as he does well against the melee-heavy compositions that the meta currently favors. Rell is up next, coming in at number 4. Rell, one of the few frontline champions they haven't nerfed into the ground. And she's really not all that bothered by Trundle, because she almost always gets her ultimate off at tier 2. Both her stun and shield will help stall out the fight, allowing whichever carry you're running to do work against the enemy team. Rell is also Ironclad, which is a strong trait in the current meta. There's plenty of options to get around her armor, but not every champion will have items to do that, making Rell with Ironclad a common trait to run against compositions like Skirmishers and Draven. Or you can run her with Skirmishers, since Jax is also an Ironclad. Overall, Rell is by far the best standalone frontline champion in the meta that most players will try to fit into their comp. We're into our top 3 with Draven coming in as our number 3 champ. Draven has solidified himself this patch as the top tier range carry. Whether with Legionnaire, Forgotten, or a mixed composition, Draven does well as a primary damage dealer. Not only is he flexible in what build you run him in, he's also flexible in which items he uses. Infinity Edge, Bloodthirster, Rageblade, RFC, Deathblade, the list goes on with potential items that you can give him. What that means is that you can easily pivot into Draven when you find him, barring games where you're slammed with a lot of early AP items. For example, if you're aiming to play Jax and instead found Draven, great! They both share a lot of the same items. Made a few generic DPS items early with no direction? Draven is there for you. Draven's flexibility and damage have skyrocketed him to the top of the meta and is currently the best range carry. Up next, we have Mordekaiser coming in at number 2. This shouldn't be much of a surprise, as Mordekaiser is dominating the current meta. Being both a Dragonslayer and Legionnaire, he fits into multiple variations of the build. Running 6 Skirmishers, add in Mordekaiser and another Dragonslayer to have 4 Dragonslayers. Playing Draven, toss in Mordekaiser to boost your frontline and provide Legionnaire for Draven. Just want to run Dragonslayer as the main trait? Mordekaiser is there. With his toes dipped into almost every composition, it's no surprise he's one of the most, if not the most, contested champions in the current meta. Besides having flexibility with his trait, he also makes for a solid frontliner due to his ability. And not only is he frontline, he can also deal a ton of damage. With items like Warmogs, Quicksilver, and Hextech Gunblade, he practically becomes immortal when 2-starred. All in all, if you're struggling to stabilize in Stage 4, we recommend using Mordekaiser, as even at a Tier 1, he's strong enough to win rounds. And the number 1 champion for patch 11.10 is Trundle. It's rare that we ever see a low-cost champion be in the number 1 spot, especially a 2-cost champion. But Trundle deserves it because, well, he's a bit overpowered. The reason is entirely due to his ability, though he also has really solid traits for the current meta. Trundle's ability steals the stats of the units he uses it on. Doing this also makes that unit weaker and Trundle a lot stronger. Against a lot of champions, this is fine, but when positioned well, it means your high stat frontliner is going to be turned into mush by Trundle. His ability is especially good against 3-star champions, which is one of the reasons we've seen Set fall off in the meta. There's not a lot else we have to say in regards to Trundle. His ability is just too good in its current form. The best advice we can offer when playing against Trundle is to be very diligent in scouting and positioning. That's going to be it for our top 10 champions of patch 11.10. But before we go, we have a few honorable mentions to talk about. Our first honorable mention is Kindred. We briefly mentioned them earlier, but unfortunately for Kindred, the Mystic of the Week went to Rise. Despite not being in the top 10, we want to make it clear that Kindred is good. If you're able to fit them into your composition, then go ahead and do it. Just be aware that 2-starring them can be difficult, and you won't always have a way to fit them into your comp. Next up, we have Kale. Kale's in an interesting spot for the current meta. A fully decked out Kale Knight composition is extremely difficult to play against, especially since there's a lot less true damage to worry about with Vayne no longer being viable. But getting to that point is difficult, making Kale very inconsistent. That said, if you're able to pivot into Kale with a strong board, the chances of winning are quite high. Lastly, we want to give a nod to LeBlanc and Katarina. We've already mentioned 2 other assassins in our top 10, so we didn't want to bog down the list with more. But both LeBlanc and Katarina are quietly carving out a niche in the meta, with both being viable carries depending on items. They aren't the most consistent carries in the meta, but they at least provide another way to play that isn't Skirmishers, Draven, or Mordekaiser. Alright, that's all we have for you for today. Let's be honest, there's not a ton of diversity in the current meta. Skirmishers, Draven, and Mordekaiser make up the bulk of the champions that you see each game. But that's alright, as Set 5 is still going through balanced growing pains, meaning the next patch should help out the meta even more. Let us know in the comment section below what champions you think deserve to be in our top 10. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.